All right, so let's talk about changing emphasis and not changing identity. So we know the film was bad, but you can't pretend like nothing happened. So you got to make some changes. But you can change your emphasis, not your identity. And here's how you do it: you don't rebuild the system, you shift. This means the structure stays the same, the language stays the same, the concept stays the same, but what you focus on gets sharper. Maybe this week the emphasis is on pad level on double teams, eyes on second level defenders, route depth at the sticks, same systems, sharper lens. Okay, identity is what gives players confidence. It's the rules they play by. When identity is stable, players walk into practice thinking, I know this, I know what we're going to do today. I know how to play that. This blocking rule for this is the same, and I can just work on my craft and get better. When identity changes, they think, what are we doing now? Oh, we're adding these new plays. And confidence lives in familiarity. Everybody knows that, if you have a favorite dish and you cook it the same way and everybody loves it, you don't play with that dish. You cook it the way everybody loves it, because you got to take a chance that you're going to change something else. And somebody's going to be like, what are you talking about? My mother did that one year when I was a child. I was probably 17, 18 years old. And my mother's a really good Southern cook, and she made collard greens. And, we're kind of big folks. So she was like, I'm going to try to do something a little bit more healthy. So one year for Thanksgiving, instead of putting ham hock in the collard greens, she used the smoked turkey leg. Worst collard greens she's ever made in her entire life. And it was so bad that, me and my dad and my sister and everybody, we're sitting here eating these collard greens, and we're struggling, because now I love collard greens. Now I promise you I do. But my mom made these things, and then finally she just looked over at everybody and said, I'm so sorry. I will never do this again. And I could not wait till Christmas when she made collards again, and they were right back to being the same great collard greens. So sometimes when you're familiar with something, you don't play with it. Same concept here. Once you're good at something, just get better at it. Clear emphasis, kind of sharpens execution. When you change emphasis, you reduce the noise. Okay. Instead of 10 new things, players hear two. Instead of new installs, they get better at what they already run. It's that whole air raid idea of the magic rep. And if you haven't seen my air raid stuff, check out my books. I'll put they're in the descriptions of a lot of the videos. You can check them out. Or go over to the YouTube channel. The sharp focus brings speed back. Speed brings confidence back. Confidence fixes execution. Bad film doesn't require more scheme. It requires emphasis inside your system. Strong coordinators don't expand the menu, they tighten the lens. Okay, so let's talk about the intent of practice and the intent of meetings, and how they must match the emphasis for the week. We've gone through this, Monday crazy phase. We've settled that down. We've had a decent ideas of how we're going to execute corrections versus change. We're going to try to protect our identity. Now, how do we do that? So we have decided our emphasis, and now your week is going to have some direction. Every meeting and every drill answers one question: what are we trying to get better at? Is the emphasis If the emphasis is on protection, for instance, let's say, we were talking about giving up pressures earlier in the clinic. QB meeting rules is about protection rules. A lot of QBs don't understand protection at the high school level like they do at the upper levels, like who the hot is, and who's Mike and all that other stuff. Most of the guys I've ever been around didn't really their quarterbacks didn't have to know all that. The OL meeting is calls and combos, and then the team period, you're giving pressure looks. Intent turns emphasis into action. That's the important thing. Intent gives emphasis direction. Unclear intent creates mixed messages. Where coordinators lose weeks, in my mind, in practice, is when intent gets scattered. O line coaches emphasizes footwork. Wide receiver coach emphasizes routes first coverage. QB coach emphasizes something else. All good coaching points, but not aligned. They're not addressing the same issue. Now, could that be okay if we're playing well and everything is good? Yeah, because each group might have something in specific that they need to work on. But if we're coming off bad film or we're coming off a bad performance, then we need to be aligned in intent and emphasis. Because remember, we talked about earlier, players hear noise, not direction. Clarity comes from everyone pushing the same emphasis. And then when the intent is clear, coaching gets simpler. It keeps us from overcoaching, and a lot of times that's the case. Remember, we talked about it earlier with the Navy SEAL thing, going back to the basics. You can't correct everything. You correct what fits the emphasis. If we're working on pad level this week, let's stay on those kind of things. Drills are all about pad level. Coaching cues are about pad level. That reduces overload. Players hear repetition, not randomness, and repetition builds confidence. And that's what we want. Practice isn't just reps, it's reinforcement. And when meeting intent and practice intent match your emphasis, players play under control, and the controlled weeks produce confident Fridays. All right, so you gave up some pressure on Friday night. First thing Sunday, you're thinking we've got to change protection. Look, hold on, coach. Don't do that. One game of pressure doesn't mean the protection is broken. Could be the back's eyes, could be the guard's calls, could be the quarterback drifting. That's not a system problem yet. That's coaching. So Monday isn't a redesign day. Okay, Monday is a clean it up day. Fix the scan rule, fix the pocket depth, fix communication, then you rep it. If it shows up next week, now you're talking about a real decision, but it's a decision that's made not on emotion, but on information. And I think that's really, really important. What actual information do you have versus your an emotional reaction from a bad day of film? And remember, that's what we're talking about, protecting your identity when things go bad in a game. Don't freaking burn the ships. When you don't rush decisions, the week stays normal. Assistants coach like usual. Players hear the same language. Practice looks like your program. When Monday turns into install day, everything speeds up. And speed without clarity is where teams get worse. Strong coordinators don't change things just because they feel like they did something. They coach first. They timing protects identity. All right, coach, let's talk about something I like to call the 2 week rule. I think, one game is just a snapshot. And like a lot of us who are teachers, you get that 5 minute snapshot when the admin walks in and they walk around the room and then they come in, they write you a little note, and this is just a little snapshot evaluation. But that's not indicative of who you are as a classroom teacher every day. That's just that 5 minutes in time. And that's sometimes you have to look at a game like that. So let's look at it like this. Let's say you're a spread team. You live in 5 man protection with back scanning inside out. Week one, you struggle with edge pressure. It shows up a few times. It doesn't look good. Sunday, the feeling is we got to change protection. But one game is a snapshot. This is where you have to back off. Remember, we talked about Monday decisions. Maybe the back's eyes were off. The tackle set was poor. The QB drifted. We talked about all these kind of things. So you coach it, you rep it, you don't redesign it. And then now, week two, same thing shows up. All right. Same front, same pressure pattern, same overload off the edge. Now you're looking at a bad night. You're looking at a trend. Trends require time and repetition. And I think that's very, very important in everything. Now it's information. That's when you say, okay, this isn't just execution. This isn't just about the kids. It's a math problem. They're overloading us. Or what are we doing to put our kids in a better situation? So now an adjustment makes sense. Not a new offense, not a new formation, but you might just adjust the protection rules. Slide instead of scanning, or lock the back opposite. Those are structural tweaks inside your system. You waited for confirmation. You said, okay, yeah, this is a problem. It wasn't just based on that one game, a bad film. This is kind of happening over and over and over. Now we need to think about that, and making that decision as quick as possible is what makes good coaches great coaches, and so on and so forth, because they're able to see that trend quicker, and that's what happens when experience. But you remember, you never want to react to emotion. You want to respond to evidence. That's the 2 week rule. Snapshots get coached, patterns get adjusted, and the patience protects the identity. All
All
right,
right,
coaches,
coaches,
I
I
hope
hope
you've
you've
figured
figured
it
it
out
out
by
by
now
now
as
as
we've
we've
gone
gone
through
through
this
this
clinic.
clinic.
We
We
realize
realize
that
that
identity
identity
really
really
isn't tested unless it's tested by adversity. Good
good
film
film
doesn't
doesn't
test
test
identity.
identity.
It's
It's
easy
easy
to
to
be
be
who
who
you
you
are
are
when
when
you're
you're
being
being
successful.
successful.
It's
It's
when
when
things
things
go
go
bad
bad
that you have to look at that. When things are going well, everybody believes in the system. Calls look good, players play fast, coaches feel smart. That's not when identity gets tested. That's when it's easy. Identity really shows up when you have adversity, and adversity reveals leadership. And as a coordinator, it's really, really important because this is when coordinators start feeling pressure. It's when assistants start looking for answers. It's when the players start wondering if things are changing. The moment you tell your, this moment kind of tells what kind of leader you are. Do you stay steady or do you start reaching? And I think what I've tried to relate to you in this clinic is that we don't want to make emotional decisions. We want to be informationally based. We don't want to do things off the cuff. We want to be that steady guy. We want to be a deliberate protector of who we are as a team and as a system. And if we feel like we don't like that, that's something that you do in the off season. Identity doesn't survive by accident. You protect it. You protect it by keeping the language the same, keeping the structure the same, fixing problems inside the system. Because when players feel system shifts every week, confidence goes with it. Oh, here we go again. Coach has been playing Madden. Coach has been playing college football. He didn't got to play thing. Even the fans understand. They see when you're grasping at straws. And that's when you can lose the community and create yourself other problems. Adversity doesn't just test execution, it tests leadership. And a strong coordinator has to protect identity when it's hardest, not when it's easy. Not when people are yelling, throw the ball, or run the ball, or doing this or doing that. You got to where you were because you were good and you believed in what you liked to do. So now it's your turn to coordinate these things and keep your identity while making adjustments based on information and not emotions. All right, Coach, we've come to the end of the course, and I just wanted to reflect a little bit on what we've talked about during these sessions. What will you protect next time? Next time the film is bad, that's the moment that matters the most. Not the call sheet, not the opponent, your response. That's where coordinators either build stability or they start tearing it down. What part of your system are you protecting when things don't look good? Identity isn't tested when it's easy, it's tested when nothing feels right. Do you have the courage to stick to your convention? Bobby Bowden once said, the more you listen to the wolves, the quicker you're going to sit with them. And that's an old way of saying, don't listen to the fans. My mentor told me if I was going to get fired from being a head coach, get fired doing what I believed in. All these things all say the same thing because they know that if you have an identity, it's going to be tested at some point. And will you stand the test? Bad film makes everything feel urgent. Okay, what will you delay? Urgency and importance aren't the same thing. We talked about that. What decisions feel like it has to be made right now? That really just needs better coaching first. Okay, sometimes discipline isn't making a move. It's not doing what you really, really feel urged to do. That's the difference between young guys and older guys. It's experience, knowing when to do something, and more importantly, when not to do something. That pause protects clarity. Okay. And what stays stable this week? Okay. Players don't need new answers every week. They need familiar rules they can trust. What are your players going to hear this week that tells them we're still us? Same language, same structure, same identity. That consistency is what lets them play fast again. Bad film doesn't ruin seasons. Instability does. And instability usually starts with one emotional decision on Monday. Strong coordinators don't let one bad night rewrite months of structure. They correct execution, they narrow the focus, they protect the identity. Because the system you built in the offseason is there for a reason. Your job in tough weeks isn't to reinvent it, it's to trust it enough to coach it better. And that will give you the varsity edge.